Okay, so I have, again, this is what I just showed you. This is my block where I cut out only the light parts of the image. So this is just what I wanted to stay white, and then I'm going to print it in my lighter color, which is going to be blue. So I'm going to set my block to the side, and we're going to ink up on this board. Now, because I'm using two colors, I'm just going to start, I'm going to work on one half, and then I'll go ahead and ink up the other color on the other side, just for speed. You guys don't have to do it that way because you'll be cutting your blocks in between. So just a review of the printing process. I'm going to scoop out some ink, apply it in the width of the brayer onto the board, and then roll through. The rolling process, remember that we want to keep it concentrated to one small area. We don't want to spread it all over the board because the ink becomes thin and it can dry out. And the purpose of this is to cover the brayer, not cover the board. And we hear that noise, which is called the Velvet Whisper, ultimate creepy. I'm going to add just a little bit more ink. I think it's just a little bit thin. Remember, if it's too thin, you'll get too light of a print. And also remember that if you're mixing colors, please, please, please do not double dip the chipboard into the ink. I did see in both of the inks I'm going to be using that somebody had double dipped and gotten just like a little bit of white and a little bit of black in both of these, so please be careful about that. All right, that's a good even coating because we have this good solid rectangle here. Remember that we're picking up the brayer to make sure we're covering it evenly. And then I'm going to roll the ink from the brayer onto my block. You guys all did really well with this process, so this is all just review. Making sure that we're covering the block consistently, going back to our ink to make sure that we're picking up extra and applying it to the block, not removing it from the block, because once the brayer starts to get low on ink, it will eventually start picking it back up off of your block instead of laying it down. Now you guys can see how the block is kind of glittery because of the wet ink. That's how we know that we have enough. Sort of that consistency. All right. You can lay your brayer like that so that it's not getting ink on anything. I'm going to move this inking plate to the side just so that I can show you. Here's the press. I'm going to put down my paper first. Even though I have a vertical print, meaning it goes up and down instead of side to side, I'm going to lay my paper side to side because you can slide it back and more evenly apply pressure. I think most of you learned that through the process last time. Paper down first, block down on top of that paper, trying your best to center it and make it even. But once you've sat it down, do not move it again. And then I'm going to slide it back underneath the press so that it's going to be underneath the plate, or the, I don't know what you call that, to apply pressure. Push it down just a few times for good measure. Applying pressure you can feel, and then I just kind of, for good luck, like to rub-a-dub it a little bit more. And then I've got this. So you can already sort of tell, it's starting to look like a dude here. Does anybody know this dude? Haley knows. Who is it? I see you nodding your head. Say it. All right. The mystery will remain, I suppose. So what you would do next is wash off your block because you're going to cut it again. And if you have not washed it off, and you guys know because some of you made adjustments to your prints while you were working, if you started to cut all this off, you would have inked up pieces of string cheese or everywhere, and it would make a huge mess, just like little dots of ink all over the place. So you want to wash this off. And again, remember that you want to wash it off between each print as well. Who can remind us why? Yep, so the ink will start to create dry spots on the block and it won't receive more ink. Don't know why that is. I'm not a scientist, but it won't. So you just can't continue to roll over. Even if you put fresh ink on your board, it's still not going to apply to your block. For whatever reason, it just won't take it. Something about the texture, I'm sure. So make sure that you're washing it off in between. So I'm going to wash my block and then cut out everything that should stay blue, and everything that should stay white will already be cut out because it's cut out right now, right? So I'm going to trash that because that's one of the disposable pieces of chipboard. If it's the paper pieces, not the plastic pieces, throw those away. Do not wash them, they're paper. They will not wash. Okay, so I'm gonna set this to the side because I'm about to print a second layer on it. Ideally, there's a little more time in between printing because you want it to dry really well, but for the sake of the demonstration, we're just gonna power through. So I'm gonna bring my inking board back over here. This time I'm gonna be printing in my darker color, which in this case is purple. So I'm going to do the exact same thing, and I'm just being extra using 2 brayers and all that stuff because I'm trying to do the demonstration, but obviously you'll have time in between and you probably wouldn't want to use 2. So we're applying it in a ribbon, repeating this process that you guys know already, rolling the brayer through that to apply it evenly. Not spreading it too far across the board, picking the brayer up every now and then, making sure we hear that velvet whisper. Looks like it's applied pretty good to the brayer, so I'm going to set my board to the side. Now I'm going to apply to my block. You can see, I'm going to go back in time here. This was the block the first time, and then I cut out more of that block. So got the same areas are cut out, but I just have more cut out now. So everything, the dark areas are the same. This part, all this is still in this print, but I've removed around it so that everything that should stay blue is now removed. And the only thing that's left is everything that should be my darkest value. So I'm going to apply that to my apply this to the block so I'm seeing good, even color across it. I don't want to see, like, if you can see light spots through the ink on your block, then it's going to print light as well. So just make sure that everything looks pretty even, dark, and consistent. Again, it's kind of glittery looking. If you look at it in the right light, you can see that, you know, where the ink is beaded up on the plate. That's a good thing. One little dry spot here. All right. Now, this is the tricky part, the alignment. You're having to place your block back on the same piece of paper so that it matches up. If you don't match it up, it's going to be shifted, which wouldn't be the end of the world, but you want to make sure that it's as close as possible to laying the block in the exact same spot that you laid it the first time. So the way to help with that, obviously we put our paper down first, and then I want to put my block on by laying it long edge matching up like this on the paper. I'm trying to match it up exactly on the edge instead of doing it this way and laying down the skinny edge, because that gives it more flexibility as it's trying to lay back down on the paper. That's just more opportunity for it to shift or flop a little bit. So if you're laying it down from this longer edge first, it's just a little bit sturdier and you can line it up better. Also, for this reason, I would recommend when you're cutting your block to at least leave some parts of the edge. Don't cut all of the background out completely. You could even leave a border around it if you wanted to. That way you have something to line it up to, because if there isn't anything printed on the edge, you don't have anything to line it up to, and you're just doing your best to put it and guess in the right spot. So I recommend either leaving a solid border around it or at least leaving some parts of the edge that are still there so you can line up to that. So I'm just as carefully as I can lining that up, praying to the printmaking goddess that it lines up in the right spot when I lay it down. Once it's down, I just have to be happy with it. Scooch it back on the press. And apply good pressure for a couple squishes. And there he is. It's hard to see in that light. That looks terrible. There you go. Who is it? It's Willie Nelson, the red-headed stranger himself. Okay, so you can see that the purple was able to cover the blue pretty evenly. That light is just like really vicious. And I was able to show value. So those darkest areas were the dark areas in the portrait, the lightest areas were the highlights in the portrait, and then I just covered everything else with a medium. Now, you do not need to do a portrait. This is just my example. I think sometimes we get our heads wrapped around in one example and you're like, that's what I'm doing. If you want to, that's cool. But this is just my example, and you remember you're wanting to relate yours to a universal theme somehow. So look at that list. Be creative, be thoughtful. You don't even necessarily have to show value the same way I use the color to show value. You could just use it as a way to show contrast or different textures. You could say, I'm going to do, this is a really lame example, so I'm going to use it because I don't want anybody to do it. I'm going to do a sun and a moon. And I'm going to print, some parts of most of the moon in blue and most of the sun in orange, and then have blue and orange accents on either one or whatever. Don't do that. That's lame. But I'm just saying that you could do it differently than I did. It does not have to look like a value portrait. You guys feel like you have a decent understanding of the reductive process? Okay, and you'll have questions as you go. As you decide your specific idea, you may have questions about, I'm not really sure what I'm supposed to be cutting out, what I'm supposed to be leaving. I'm happy one-on-one to address those and try to figure out how I can help you. So right now, we're working on ideas. I want you to get some sketches together, think about the color scheme that you'll be needing to use, what's the darkest, what's the lightest, and then we can move from there to figure out how to carve that on your block. All right, so let's do some research, get to work.